Hi, it's Tammy. Thought I would talk a little bit today about histamine. We hear people speaking about histamine intolerance and eating, not eating histamine foods or, I'm not really sure what the school of thought is on that as far as the general public is concerned. I will say that it is a major concern when it comes to our health and well-being, and it's something that I believe is not being addressed properly. The reason I say that is because depression and anxiety, to begin with, is rampantly diagnosed. There's a lot of pharmaceuticals being administered for a number of depressive and anxious states. Oftentimes they cross over, and they're being prescribed for children now. I don't know. I don't know for how long. The kiddos that I get to serve come to me. When they come, they're generally in their early years. And when I mean early years, we're talking 4, 5, 6-year-old children that have been on these SSRIs and these these anxiety medications. They think they're on it for anxiety when in fact they are an SSRI, which is also considered an antidepressant. Oftentimes with ADHD, you see children being placed on any variety of medications depending on how the child presents and the doctor believes is the necessary way to approach it. That said, with regards to ADHD, I've seen kids placed on, obviously, with Strattera and other, I can't come up with the names off the top of my head, so please forgive me, but if you have a child or know of a child on, Ritalin is another one, but if you know of them, they're generally taking some form of medication. Oftentimes the parents are opting to not place them on and adjust their diets. However, we're not really looking at, again, from my perspective, not that everybody should be looking at it from my perspective, but what I've established through the work that I do is an alternative viewpoint that addresses the anxiety, the stimming, the scripting, the ADHD, the inability to sit still, and focus. So this isn't a judgment call. This is merely about, looking at the different parameters with which these medications are being recommended. Again, like I said, there's the typical medication. However, I do have a little guy who was diagnosed with ADHD on top of his autism and was placed on 10X. Now, 10X, there's two different forms of it, but he is literally on 10X, and 10X is a high blood pressure medication. The reason why it works as such is because it works to a degree, is it provides a soothing. It helps to relax the body. What it does is it's a norepinephrine reuptake inhibitor, so that means it keeps the norepinephrine in the body. And I think I have too much sunlight coming in. Pardon me. Here we go. Let's try that. That's a little bit better. So anyway, I want to keep going. This is real life. And I don't want to miss a beat. So yeah, as a norepinephrine reuptake inhibitor, what that means is the norepinephrine remains in the brain and helps to work with the autonomic nervous system, helping to relax and soothe norepinephrine. Also, during that dopamine norepinephrine conversion, it does stimulate yawning, which helps to wake the brain up and, again, kind of calm things down. So that is the reason why it would be used in the arena of ADHD, but it doesn't explain why it would be used in high blood pressure, or does it? The thing is with high blood pressure, as I've mentioned before, is there's any number of reasons why we have high blood pressure. It can truly be a regulation of electrolytes and fluids, and so you need a water pill diuretic to help do that. Other issues that affect the blood pressure would be the blood sugar. If we're not breaking down the sugars in our body properly, and there becomes a sudden drop in blood sugar, that will crank the epinephrine and create, an excitability. So that would be a reason. Also, another reason is anxiety itself, and that goes back to everything that I was beginning this entire video on, which is histamine. So back to what histamine is, how it actually operates in the body, and what we can do to begin to regulate these histamine levels on a more natural level, instead of having to put, especially our young guys and gals, on these medications. Now, I'm going to give a couple of examples, because it's as an example as to what, our professionals, for as brilliant as they are, and as concerned as they are, and wanting us to get better and overcome whatever particular health issue we're dealing with, they don't really get and understand what particular factors in the body are directly linked to the symptoms that we're displaying. Now, I say that with all due respect, because the fact is we have so many pharmaceuticals, and to be able to pinpoint exactly what's going on in the body is difficult. It's, we can do these genetic tests. In fact, yesterday I was just online and saw an ad for 23andMe. It's great for finding relatives in other parts of the world. It's great for kind of getting your familial bloodline. As far as utilizing these methylation tests to identify genetic adaptations that point to health issues, they're not that reliable, because you never know which genetic complex, how your genome is structured. You don't really know which ones are malfunctioning and which ones are silent, with the potential to malfunction given the chemicals that we are exposed to on a daily basis. So that said, an example of, kind of not really being clear what is generating anxiety could be someone is placed, as I mentioned earlier, on an SSRI. Zoloft is a particular one, and that works on the serotonin levels as well as the dopamine. So again, we understand an SSRI to be a serotonin select reuptake inhibitor. So that means it keeps the serotonin in the brain, okay? However, if there's other factors that can be linked to anxiety, and histamine is one of them. A particular case I have in mind was a young woman was placed on and has been on this SSRI for an extended period of time. She's also had significant allergy issues her entire life, ever since her young years, and was handed also an as-needed anxiolytic in the event that she starts to have a panic attack. Well, believe it or not, that anxiolytic that she was placed on is a histamine antagonist, okay? And it's specifically targeting the H1 receptor, which is found in a number of tissues, including the central nervous system. So I find it fascinating that even though we don't really specifically know what's creating her anxiety, when she goes to the doctor and the doctor places her, she's reported anxiety. And this is why I'm adamant about people realizing that everything is related. To show up at a doctor's office and say, I have anxiety, and yes, they do, inquire about any other health issues, any other supplements or medications that we're taking, they don't factor all of that into the picture. So they're really, no matter what field they're working in, they're not practicing holistic medicine as far as I'm concerned, because holistic means, again, addressing everything as one, and seeing that everything is directly related. So in this case, I found it fascinating that she was placed on a histamine antagonist, and in the event that she escalates to the point where she can't relax with the Zoloft, also known as sertraline. That's the generic name for it. So after speaking with her, and this one came to mind because I have so many clients that are dealing with histamine levels, because histamine intolerance can actually generate anxiety. It can generate depression. It can, we see fatigue. We see chronic pain. You can see irritability. You will find digestive issues, flushing of the skin, itchiness. The actual list of symptoms that are directly related to histamine intolerance is extensive. And if you would like more information on what other symptoms are involved, if I haven't listed them here, then please contact me and I will be happy to email you additional information as far as what else you can expect or what else is been linked to histamine intolerance. Now, why is this called histamine intolerance? Does this mean that, you have to limit your diet and, are destined to have histamine issues? Well, it could. It definitely could. But the reason why we have histamine intolerance is a little bit more detailed than that. It's not just that you've been singled out and you are having histamine issues. My suspicion, pardon me, is that many people are dealing with histamine issues. The reason why is it's a major mediator in the immune system, and the reason why it's linked to allergies. It's the reason why you get the runny nose, the itchy eyes, the watery eyes, possibly headaches. There's a whole host of reasons why you would actually, why it's said to be a mediator within the immune system. It also has an impact on the gastric acids. It's a neuromodulator. It also is related to our respiration as well as our cardiovascular system. In other words, it's a neurotransmitter that is used throughout the body, and it is found in all various places within tissues within the body. As well, and it is what goes into developing mast cells. So the mast cell is an extension of histamine. And mast cell would be, could be something as simple as developing cyst or, excess of tissue development. These would all be a mast cell. Mast cell is what happens. It's a response by the body due to trauma, injury. Even just, again, if depending on your genetics, you may just develop cysts. Women can develop cysts in their breasts. We can develop cysts everywhere, all along the spine. And this is evidence of histamine not being used and broken down properly. Now, I go back to why intolerance. Well, there's actually two particular genes. One is the HMT gene and the DAO gene. The HMT, and I'm not going to get real scientific here, I just want to give you an idea of what these two different genes do. HMT actually inactivates histamine in the body, which is a majorly important thing to remember. So if you've been exposed to an allergen, or you have been exposed to a particular virus or bacteria that's going around that you might be getting sick with, and once you're over it, the histamine continues to float throughout the body. It needs to be inactivated. Otherwise, we'll get into the otherwise in a minute. The other concern is with the DAO gene. The DAO gene actually metabolizes histamine and converts it into various other chemicals that are now used by the body. So if you have particular adaptations on either one of those two genes, and again, you can certainly do a test and identify possibly I have not seen a methylation test that actually reveals HMT. Actually, it doesn't even reveal the DAO. You'd have to really do work with somebody who can map it out entirely and begin to check into those things for you. And there again, even if you do show up, here's what I'm going to say. I've seen scores of these tests. And depending on the area that you grew up in, and not even the relationship, but just the area that you grew up in, there is a similarity among all of us in regard to the systemic adaptations that we have. Again, I say this with all due respect to any companies that are doing this. It's really difficult to take my genome and look at somebody in another part of the country, maybe a friend, doesn't make any difference. And there's going to be a lot of similarities. I've seen this time and time again. I've done it just out of just pure curiosity. I've wanted to see if this person had 22 adaptations on this particular gene. What does this person have? What is separating us so much that, she doesn't have any health issues, or she has allergies, maybe some anxiety. And this person over here has cancer. What's the difference? Well, the difference is actually within the methylation pathway, the epigenome, which adapts itself through thought, exposure to environmental toxins, the foods that we eat. There's a whole host of reasons, lifestyle, that the epigenome, aka methylation pathway, adapts itself. So your overall genome, there's too many similarities. It has adapted through the ages. So to isolate an HMT defect, polymorphism, adaptation, and a DAO doesn't necessarily mean that that is what you have going on. It's the full scope of symptoms that are happening that can be at that point addressed to, number one, help rewire and modify the genetic expression, and actually help stimulate the body to do what it's supposed to do. It's not about taking an antihistamine. It's about helping the body do what it's supposed to do. Because trust me, histamine is far more important than just helping to flush toxins out, and protect the body, go into defense mode, or just, irritate the fool out of us because something is making our nose run and our eyes itch, and we immediately run for the antihistamines. Well, I'm going to tell you that if we actually learned how to manage our bodies and understand the communication that is coming through, we can truly modify these expressions and help develop the system so that it actually, if a runny nose happens and you're congested, let it go. It's a healing crisis. Don't reach for the antihistamine. Don't hesitate to blow your nose. Now, if you're stuffy and you can't breathe, there are oils that will actually help relieve that. There are ways to help flush those out so that you can open up and begin breathing again without inhibiting the histamine response. Again, the major histocompatibility complex is the crux of our immune system, and it does involve histamine, and it, scientifically and very complexly, we can get into talking about that. But for you and I, and just understanding, and not to oversimplify, but to provide insight as to how we as individuals can begin to adjust our health so that the body can, again, do what it's designed to do. I'm not suggesting that we're trying to heal or cure anything. The body is what can do that. But you have to give it the right information. You have to provide the right nutrients. Okay. So depending on your genetic makeup and whether or not you're metabolizing histamine properly, or for that matter, even inactivating it, there's a couple of ways to do this. So quercetin, spelled Quercetin, actually helps with the inactivation of histamine. You can get it in as a supplement form. It is a bioflavonoid that is found in such plants as stevia. It's also found in artichokes, and it's found in a very yummy form, which is in the inside of the rind of the citrus fruits. That white stuff that I love to munch on is full of quercetin as well. But again, you can also take it as a supplement form. Quercetin, again, helps to inactivate. It helps to relieve congestion because it does stimulate anti-inflammatory responses, which histamine does. Histamine will trigger inflammation. So here again, you're working with what the body is trying to do to help you, and at the same time not become overwhelmed with too much histamine. Because here's the other thing. Too much histamine in the body can stimulate too much estrogen, an increase in estrogen levels, and vice versa. Estrogen levels will cause histamine levels to go up. So there's another reason why you might have too much histamine floating around. And the interesting thing about it is we know that estrogen can create irritability and excitability as well. So are you actually dealing with a histamine problem, or are you dealing more with an estrogen issue? Again, working with someone who is willing to take your entire system holistically and begin to help you sort through these things. Initially, quercetin would be ideal because even if you have escalated estrogen levels, you're going to, it's going to cause histamine levels to go up because too much estrogen is an aggravant to the body, and therefore the body is going to produce the histamine to help relieve it. It's the reason why when you eat gluten or gluten products, why you have the inflammation occur. And inflammation, I don't mean just congestion. I mean, there's systemic congestion that can occur even if you don't look bloated, that will cause the depression, the pain in the stomach, the irritability, the itchiness. That is, even though it is related to the gluten in the food, gluten is a protein, but that will actually trigger a histamine response depending, again, on your genetic sequencing. So that's the reason why we think we have food allergies and food sensitivities. It's more, but it's not so much that the food is probably, now granted, I don't necessarily agree with refined foods. I want to say that. And I'm happy to have conversations and potentially even create another video and go really out on a limb at some point as to if you actually were to help your body rewire itself, some of the, these refined sugars and flours wouldn't be as harmful to us because the body would actually know what it's supposed to do. Right now, it's an absolute chaos and confusion because we have messed with the food, and the body's like, I don't know, I'm not getting what I need, and it's robbing Peter to pay Paul. So that's a whole nother story. However, that said, that's the reason why people have histamine reactions with gluten. It is also the reason why we have histamine reactions with dairy. We call it being lactose intolerant. There are people who do have lactose intolerant, but it is not the majority of the population. It is creating a histamine reaction in the body, and depending again on your genetic structure, you have an increase in histamine, and now you're not able to inactivate it. So this is the reason why quercetin is very, very beneficial. Should you stop eating these foods? Well, of course, you don't want to eat things that are going to cause upset and cause a sensitivity or allergy. And it's not really an allergy, so to speak. It's more of a sensitivity. I personally was having issues for the longest time with anything that had red chili. I don't mean peppers. I mean in the sense of, bell peppers. I'm talking about that really good chili that we get here in New Mexico. It was causing extraordinary amount of histamine issues. I would just know, it was creating an extraordinary histamine reaction. So I had to really work with my body as well. So, so there again, you've got the quercetin. Another thing that I've talked about in prior videos has been digestive enzymes. You want to be able to assimilate the protein, carbohydrates, and fats that you're eating break it down so that they're picked up by the cells, so that the cells can actually now metabolize these foods more so on a cellular level. Now, I want to say something along those lines. A lot of us struggle with the ability to metabolize carbohydrates and sugars properly. And I don't mean the foods that you're eating. I'm talking about the way the foods are broken down. So if you start with digestive enzymes and help facilitate that, it's easier for the body to begin to utilize these foods for energy and conversion. Now, this is where the oils come in. The oils actually work, and they have found that work directly with the Krebs cycle. Okay, and that's where a lot of the carbohydrates are being metabolized on a cellular level. The folate cycle, also known along the lines of the methylation pathway, is necessary for amino acid metabolism. There again, the oils actually do help in that arena. This is the reason why we talk about not eating meat, because homocysteine, which is commonly picked up and acquired through the meats, the body struggles to break it down on a cellular level. Homocysteine, it's actually used to convert into SAMe, methathione. It's also needed for the conversion into cysteine that now factors into neurotransmitter and hormone production. It's also converted at the HMT gene. And if you're not breaking down your proteins properly, your amino acids properly, you have excessive homocysteine levels. If you have any variations along that way, and that's also going to cause a high histamine response or reaction, or too much histamine in the system. And then now compound that if the body's not if it's not actually metabolizing it properly. So you can begin to see how this is all the inner workings, and depending on where your adaptations are, how it's going to manifest in your body. So we've talked about digestive enzymes. We've talked about quercetin. A couple of other things that you can do. I'm trying to think off the top of my head as far as, diet. You can avoid initially, and in fact, I would encourage avoiding foods that trigger a high histamine reaction. So like I said, the dairy, the gluten foods. Do you have to, my theory is, though, the more we limit what we allow ourselves to enjoy, this gets into a very mindful, energetic expression of what's going on in the body, and we have been able to show that our thoughts do affect the genetic expression. This has been demonstrated time and time again. There's a series of books out there that have reflected this, and The Biology of Belief is one of them. There are other ones. If you want to know more about those, again, contact me, that really get into the science behind our thoughts. But my theory is the more rigid we are and limiting the way we are with our diets and really restrictive, the body will respond in that way, and it will be troubled. So I'm encouraging people to keep an open mind and possibly even just reintroduce things. Like I said to you earlier, I love chili, and it got to the point where it was creating such a problem for me that I had to stop eating it. Yet again, through this work, I've been able to adjust my own histamine reactions and begin to reduce the evidence that is in my body, which included cysts. I will not going to lie to you. I was diagnosed. They actually thought I had breast cancer, and turned out I had just massive cysts in one of my breasts that has completely gone away. So I am, this is possible to do. So that said, the foods such as fermented foods, you want to avoid things like kombucha. Yes, I know it's healthy. I love it. And it's very good for you for many, many people. However, if you are dealing with histamine issues, kombucha is not a really advisable one. Neither is yogurt, neither is kefir. wine, beer, anything that's been, any meats that have been cured, or high, vinegary types of foods. You want to avoid anything like that because those will immediately trigger a histamine reaction in the body. And until we get things, or you get things regulated, it's going to be very hard to manage yourself. And so bringing comfort into your body and helping the body to rewire itself. Another important nutrient is a B6. I would encourage just B complex vitamins, period. Coenzymated B complex vitamins are probably the best that you can do because it will help with the carbohydrate metabolism as well as working on those genes. They also can, like I said, both the HMT and the DAO gene. So that would be one way therapeutically to override those genes by taking, high levels of B complex. They are water soluble, and the body does flush them, whatever's not being used. So that said, there again, depending on what you're dealing with genetically, there are oils that you can now begin to consider incorporating. If you are taking an anxiolytic, please avoid using German chamomile altogether. You also don't want to use kava kava. You don't want to use St. John's wort, anything like that along the lines of valerian root when it comes to taking SSRIs. Other anxiolytics, you don't want to, and including SSRIs, you don't want to use German chamomile essential oil, also known as blue. It's also chamomile. It can be tansy is another one. These are create secondary metabolites. These are broken down by the liver and can actually create high blood serum levels of the medication that you're taking, which will increase, believe it or not, anxiety. The other concern I have with high histamine levels, like I said, it does increase your estrogen levels, and therefore we have a tendency to see more yeast in the body. German chamomile is an amazing antifungal. So if you do have yeast issues, whether it be vaginally or orally, or even if you get like seborrheic dermatitis, that's a type of fungus. If you feel like you actually are dealing with yeast issues, you can instead use geranium. Use it with caution because it will it helps to regulate estrogen levels, which helps and it also helps to reduce the yeast in the body. But again, if we're talking about just a couple of symptoms, it's really important to be able to just check in and get a full picture of really what you're dealing with and some guidance on what to do. Another oil that you can use instead of the German chamomile would be the Roman chamomile because it works on helping to relieve histamine issues and mast cell development. And it actually helps to break it down, inactivate it like we were talking about, and flush it. Beets are a really good food. I know I'm kind of skipping around here. Beets actually are high in folate and will, there again, you can make chips out of them. I'm not a big fan of beets at all, but you can actually make chips out of them and really support your digestive system as well as provide the body with an extraordinary source of folate. So another oil that you can use is cedarwood atlas. It helps to flush toxins from the fatty tissues, as well as through the lymph, and you can also, and it actually helps with the use of histamine. So those are some oil ideas in dealing with the various numbers. Like I said, the histamine, the estrogen, and the yeast that could potentially build up. But these are the reasons why we see the types of symptoms that we do. And again, if you have any questions with regards to what else might be considered a symptom of a histamine reaction, by all means, let me know. I'm happy to answer your questions. And if you need guidance, I'm always available for that. Until then, have a beautiful day I'm really, really happy to be able to provide you with this kind of information. Please let me know what questions you have. And until then, until the next video, I wish you well. Bye.